Cash out refinancing versus a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. Which is better? Which one should you go with? And what are the pros and cons of each of the choices? Hey, what's up everybody? This is Sam Kwok here, one of the Kwok Brothers, and welcome back to our channel. And today we're going to talk about the difference between a home equity line of credit and getting a cash out refinance in the context of investing in real estate. So we're going to talk about the differences, what are the pros and cons, which one should you get, what are some of the things you should be watching out for either of the options. And of course, before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to learn more about real estate investing, buying rental properties, and creating more positive cash flow. So let's go and draw up the difference between a cash out refinance versus a home equity line of credit. Both cash out refinance and a home equity line of credit both involve in taking the equity out from a real estate and turning them into a reusable cash. So let's go and first talk about the cash out refinance and typically when it's used in the context of real estate investing. Now, when it comes to a cash out refinance, let's for example say that you own 100% of the equity on this property, meaning you have no debt, your mortgage has been paid off, or you may have bought the property using cash. So what you do with the cash out refinance is that typically you'll get a mortgage on an existing property that you own. Most banks and credit unions will lend you on an 80% loan to value of the property. So if the property is worth $100,000, the lender is willing to give you up to $80,000 in terms of a cash out refinance. And most cash out refinance, depending on the terms you go with, it can be either 15-year amortization or 30-year amortization on a fixed rate interest. Now, when getting a cash out refinance, the bank will typically require an appraisal done on the property to see how much the property is actually worth based on comps, features of the property, square footage, bedroom and bathroom counts, as well as other miscellaneous features that may affect the value of the property. From there, the bank will determine the interest rate based on your FICO score, as well as assess the closing costs. So the typical closing costs that you'll pay will be title fees, as well as the underwriting fee, and some of the other administrative fees that you may pay while going through the cash out refinance. Once all the loan docs are closed, you would typically get a check from the bank, and that will be deposited against your checking account, and you can pretty much use the money to do whatever you want. Generally, obviously, in the context of real estate investing, you're expecting to use that money to then go and buy other real estate properties, to go and fix and flip, or to buy your next rental properties. But then again, you can go and use that money to go and smash the like button for our YouTube algorithm. And of course, to get the credit side, now you have a new installment loan that's reporting on your credit report on a 30 or 15-year amortization. And of course, that's going to have an impact on your credit. A new inquiry has been created, the overall age of your credit went down, and you have a new account that's been set up and it's being reported to your credit report. Now, with the cash out refinance, it's typically preached and promoted by users of the BRRRR strategy, which stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So each time you do a cash out refinance, you have to go through the application process, you have to get your credit check, as well as appraisal on your property, which in just a few minutes, I'll talk about the pros and cons of the cash out refinance. Okay, so let's come across on the HELOC side and why it's a little different than the cash out refinance. Now, with the home equity line of credit, keep in mind it's a revolving line of credit, meaning that you can pay back, reuse, pay back, reuse. So think of it like a credit card that's attached to the home equity. And also with the HELOC, there are two typical versions with the home equity line of credit. There's the second lien position side as well as the first lien position side. The more common version of the home equity line of credit is the second lien position HELOC, in which typically you have an existing mortgage and you get a HELOC on top of that of whichever equity or however much equity you have remaining on the property. And then there's the first lien HELOC, which will replace your mortgage and be the only debt on your property. So instead of having a mortgage, think of it having a mega HELOC on your property, and that's the only debt that you'll have on the property. Now, with the process of getting a HELOC, it varies depending on which version of the HELOC you get, the first lien version versus the second lien version. Now, the typical process, and again, this depends on what you get and what banks you go to, it's very similar to the cash out refinance, but I'll point out some of the things that may be different as you go and apply for a home equity line of credit. First, the bank may require an appraisal, in which I've seen a lot of times HELOCs get closed without doing an actual in-person appraisal. Sometimes the banks are opting in to what's called a desk appraisal, which a banker or underwriter will then appraise the property using a software or some sort of system to determine the value of the property. And some banks, depending on what lien you get, a first lien versus second lien, may charge you closing costs, and sometimes there may be an application fee. And a lot of times these application fees are anywhere between $25 to $100 for the application. But in most cases, for a second lien HELOC, they won't charge you a closing cost. But I do see quite a banks that charge a closing cost for a first lien HELOC, just like a cash out refinance. From there, just like a cash out refinance, if you're taking a home equity line of credit to replace your existing mortgage, what would typically happen is that the bank will pay off the existing mortgage and you'll get a release of the mortgage, but you have a new mortgage, which is now your first lien HELOC. The bank that has your HELOC will typically have you set up a checking account, which then you can draw the money out from the HELOC to the checking account. You can write checks now, you can swipe your debit card, or you can use a credit card and then pay off the credit card using your checking account that has a connection with the first lien HELOC. And of course, assuming that you have a paid off property and you get a first lien HELOC, you pretty much have a checkbook to access your entire equity whenever you want, just like a credit card. So again, if your home value is at $100,000 and the bank gives you an 80% loan to value first lien HELOC, it just means that you have $80,000 limit that you can go and use whenever you need to, but you don't have to use the entire $80,000. Typically, I see people use $20,000 of it for a rehab cost, or they may use $50,000 of it to acquire a new property. So you can use it whenever you want. It's on demand and you only pay interest on what you actually use instead of the entire limit, unlike the cash out refinance. So now that we drew the difference between a cash out refinance versus a home equity line of credit, let's go and talk about the pros and cons. And I think the obvious difference from the get-go is the liquidity between the cash out refinance versus a first lien HELOC. Whereas a cash out refinance, once you use that money and pay it off, it's gone. You have to go back and do another refinance and go through another application process, another appraisal, another closing cost. So it's a whole entire process all over if you're looking to get that money back into usage again. However, with the first lien HELOC, once you have a line of credit, you have a funding that you can pay back, reuse, pay back and reuse over and over again, as long as you're within the draw period, which is typically anywhere between 10 to 15 years. So you have 10 to 15 years where you can pay it off, reuse, pay it off, and reuse. And of course, this is extremely helpful if you have a fix and flip business, whereas you need the money to acquire property and also money to rehab the property, put it on the market, sell it, pay off the HELOC, and then have that funds to use again for the next flip projects to move on. Whereas with the cash out refinance, every time you have a new project, you have to go through the whole process of applying and getting a new cash out refinance, going through the appraisal, paying the closing costs all over again each time you move on to the next project. So with the HELOC, it does give you more flexibility. It's more efficient and effective when it comes to the usability as well as the liquidity. And I know what you guys are thinking. It's really hard to get a home equity line of credit on investment properties or non-owner occupied properties. Well, that's true, but it depends on the banks and what the underwriting criteria is like for that specific bank. Remember, a home equity line of credit, unlike most cash out refinance programs, it's non-qualifying mortgage, which means that the banks have different guidelines and different underwriting criteria, and each bank may have different guidelines and different programs that they follow with a home equity line of credit. So you may see one group of banks that don't lend a HELOC on an investment property, but you may see another group of banks that absolutely do lend on HELOCs for investment properties. So it just depends on which banks you go to that does HELOCs on investment properties. So one can say that that is a typical drawback when it comes to getting a first lien HELOC or a second lien HELOC on an investment property, whereas with a cash out refinance, the general guideline is pretty fluid and it's kind of expected that you should go and cash out refinance, and that's been the norm. But because a lot of banks don't do a HELOC on investment property, there's a little bit of a perception amongst the investor community that getting a HELOC on investment property or a non-owner occupied property is rather difficult. But my answer to that is, again, it depends on the bank, it depends on the guidelines that the bank is using, and also depends on what state you live in, because certain states have different laws and regulation as to how HELOC can be treated. You can also use the first lien HELOC to pay off your mortgage even faster, and I have a separate video that I made. I'm going to put that in the video description down below. Now, in the context of real estate investing and as a landlord myself, I would choose the first lien HELOC over the cash out refinance, mainly because I have the flexibility to reuse the funds over and over again as long as I'm within the draw period. Think of it like the cash out refinance to be a disposable battery, whereas the first lien HELOC is like a rechargeable battery where if you are done using it, you can recharge it, right? And use it again, recharge it, use it again. You get the point. Whereas a cash out refinance, you take it out once, and once you pay it off, it's gone, unless you go and get another cash out refinance and then you have to pay it off again and then repeat that cycle. Now, just as a little bit of a shameless plug, my brother and I were able to buy 75 rental units without using our own money or without even getting a cash out refinance or a HELOC. We were able to do so through raising money as well as negotiating for owner financing. So we actually just wrote a book called 0 to 75 Units in Just 1 Year, where we're going to show you how we were able to buy 75 rental units in just 1 year without using our own money or credit. We'll give you all the strategies. We'll detail the case study as well as some of the apartment buildings that we bought using the strategies that are going to teach you right here in this book. And this book is free, and all you have to do is cover shipping. So if you guys want this book for free, go down below where I left the link, 0to75units.com. Just pay for shipping and we'll get it out to you as soon as possible. With that being said, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more HELOC conversation as well as buying more rental properties and investing in real estate. And go and check out some of the other videos that we have that you might be interested about this topic.